This video fits into a whole series of videos on innovation that are available on the course. Here we want to further explore the concept and talk about related issues related to previous videos, but also to amplify those and perhaps extend the concepts. So innovation, what it is and why it's important. Here we're going to look at the overall importance of innovation in the context of development not just of markets but of individual business units, and looking at the way in which innovation is responsible for the way in which organizations traverse time. Innovation is the commercialization of successful inventions. And by successful is meant meets customer requirements. After all, anyone can invent something. Perhaps it's a pointless invention, or an invention that doesn't do anything to satisfy customers' needs or requirements. It just literally sit there as an interesting novelty, but it's not important commercially. So if an invention meets customers' requirements, it's meant to be, that is, successful. So it's the commercialization of successful innovations that are targeted at customers' needs. Successful could mean improved efficiency with a reduction in production costs. We have to look at innovations being targeted at customers, in a sense, external to the organization. So the organization make products or deliver services and aim to satisfy customer needs. That's outside. But also innovation can apply within the organization, looking at better ways of streamlining the organization, cutting costs, leading to greater efficiency within the organization. Innovation is often associated with the development and use of new technologies. It doesn't have to be the case, but we're so accustomed nowadays to think of innovation and new technology. New technology seems to be pervasive. It's everywhere. We have the application of computing technology in many areas of our everyday lives, from education, like we're doing right now, or medicine, or travel, or retailing. So many areas of our lives are touched by new technologies that often we associate the two together. We have to bear in mind, however, that innovation can be anything which is an improvement to a product. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the application of new technology. It could be a new style, a new functionality, a new arrangement of the equipment or of the product itself. It just so happens we often associate it with new technology. However, any new cost-saving approach to production, administration, distribution, improving quality and extending market presence or other functional area of the business may be considered as innovative. So, whilst they may include new technologies, for example, administration may have better networking facilities, better databases for storage of information and retrieval of information. Improved quality could also be mechanized and automated through the use of new technologies, where computer-aided manufacturing techniques could be employed. So we can imagine computing facilities pervading all of point 3 on the slide here. But we could also imagine it not to be the case. It could be the case that quality is improved simply by having focus groups, customers coming to the organization and giving their opinions about products and suggesting ways of improving the products. Now, that is going directly to the source of income, going to the customers to get their opinions about the product and seeing if the customers have got suggestions for improvement. A long-term commitment to innovation, or to modernity if you like, and research and development all promote and secure the business in the marketplace. It's certainly the case that we live in a globalized economy. And globalized means that companies domestically are in competition with companies perhaps on the other side of the world. And the companies on the other side of the world are trying to outwit the companies domestically, as are the companies domestically trying to outwit those. Competition is not confined within national boundaries. We live in very much a globalized world. There are forces within the world who still see national boundaries as very important to be protected, and perhaps contact with outside markets to be restrained because they're costing jobs domestically. But that's one view. There is another view that is we live in a globalized world, and there's very little we can do about it. Companies domestically are in competition with companies all over the world. So they must be competitive. They must outwit the competition. They must have better products. They must have more innovative products, better designed, more functionality, more directly linked to customer requirements. And they must have programs, research and development programs, running constantly, aimed at making further improvements to the product, making changes, making recommendations, all of which is designed to secure the business in the marketplace and to generate long-term profitability. Innovation is the commercialization of invention or change in practice. So innovation is taking an invention and commercializing it. It's also putting pressure on the inventors to constantly modify the product, to change it, to bring it up to date, to improve it. And that's the process of innovation. So innovation is the commercialization of invention. It's also the commercialization of a change in practice. It could be, we're talking here about a service sector company. It's perhaps a company providing, let's say, accountancy services to small businesses. Well, the accountancy company itself needs to innovate. It needs to make sure it's got good communications channels, it's got the latest perhaps accounting software to help it produce the accounts and to do it efficiently. There's all sorts of pressure which is innovative on companies who deliver services, but also on companies who deliver physical products. So innovation we may view as the commercialization of invention and of change in practice. Change in practice being related to the service sector. So commercialization is the act of bringing a product or service to market with a view of generating a profit. That's what we mean by commercialization. It's bringing the product or the service to the market with a view of making a profit. In a sense, there's no point in producing the product in the first place if it's not aimed at producing a profit. The profits are used to pay the overheads, pay the salaries, pay the wages, give employment, cover the premises, but also to finance further research and development into the product, which will further sustain the business. So without commercialization, the product will not go to market. It'll just remain an interesting invention, but it does not go to the customers. Invention is the development of a new physical product aimed at improving production methods or aimed at delivering a totally new product on the market. Invention may be the product of dedicated research, but sometimes it may be serendipitous, or if you like, based on luck. Many inventions are just based on luck. We talk about them being invented, which sounds like humans have sat down and deliberately designed the product, but sometimes it's just luck. Perhaps they've invented something to do something and they found out that it in fact does something else. Microwave ovens. That was done by accident. It was discovered by accident. But there are many products on the market that are the result of just luck. Just somebody observing that some event happens as a consequence of something else. And we're bright enough, we're intelligent enough to go from there to commercialization. So it's interesting to do a troll online in a browser and just look for serendipity and just see what comes up, and just type in serendipity and inventions, and you'll probably get a list of some of the products that have come about by just sheer luck. But sometimes it's dedicated research. Sometimes companies are trying to get people to focus in on developing a product with certain dimensions or qualifications. So they have a brief from the management. Try to design a product that will achieve the following. And the reason why they have the brief is, of course, because the organization has the resources, perhaps the capital equipment necessary to generate a product that meets that brief. So they may give the research and development team a brief about the type of product they want and ask for ideas. Or it could be, as I just said, it could just be down to luck. One day somebody does something and they observe an outcome which surprised them. And then they took that idea and played around with it. That became, if you like, their invention or their discovery. And then they commercialized it and innovated the product to meet market requirements. Change of practice. This refers to the introduction of new ways of working and new organizational designs. So we think of innovation being embodied in a product, and that's a widespread view. But innovation could also apply to the way in which products are made, to the processes that products go through, to the design of the organization, to the methods that are used. So change in practice refers to different ways of working and to different organizational designs. And clearly, if we think about it, products tend to be different. And each company will therefore have a slightly different design to do to its neighbour. Until we finally get to some of the more really radically different organizations, perhaps ones working in the information business, the information technology business. And they don't seem to have boundaries like, say, traditional engineering companies. They don't have a production sector and an administration sector that's way off someplace else, and stores, and what they've got is perhaps simply people with computers working within a given environment. So when we think of innovation, we have to be very flexible about what we mean. It's related to invention, it follows on from invention, but it could also relate to ways of working. Now, innovation is a deliberate and programmed process that takes successful ideas and products to market. So it takes successful ideas and successful products and takes those to market. So it's a deliberate act. It's not serendipitous, like we said earlier. This is not luck. Innovation is deliberate, and it follows sequences. It's programmed. In other words, there's a starting point. They look at the product, they try to make changes, they factor in the changes, they criticize the changes, they have meetings, they review the outcomes, they look at the proposed changes critically, and so on and so on. The idea is it's not random. This is deliberate. There's a deliberate scheme of work that we can call innovation. But it's, generally speaking, a continuous process, continuously looking at the product to try to improve it. Because, as I said earlier, businesses are in competition, and other companies will be doing the same thing, and each one worries about being left behind. So it's a continuous process of trying to update the products and the services. The process starts with invention and then moves to innovation. So it may be that somebody invents something which is a good idea. Perhaps nobody had thought about this before. It's an invention. But then the company innovated and tried to keep the invention in the marketplace, because competitors will, once they see the invention, they will want to copy it if it's successful. And then it's the company that most successfully innovates that's going to win. And we can see this in lots of industries. We can see it in the mobile phone industry. We see Samsung offering a very good range of products, telephones. We see Apple, and we see one trying to beat the other. And then there are new companies coming in, some from China and from different countries, and they offer different functionality again, and all trying to improve their functionality to give the customer a better experience. And all of them are innovating, but they're innovating on a continuous basis. Now, desirable qualities for innovation. Well, there must be alert to profit opportunities. So, desirable qualities for invention, I should say, must be alert to profit opportunities. People do invent just for the fun of it, but it's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to do anything unless it's aimed at commercialization, unless it's aimed at the market and making it widely available. So by and large, desirable qualities for invention is they should aim for products that will have commercial potential. Alertness to profit opportunities, I should say here, is one of the definitions of entrepreneurship that was offered by Israel Kirzner. And it's quite a famous, simple definition for entrepreneurship: alertness to profit opportunities. So instead of just inventing something that doesn't really address any particular needs or wants in the marketplace, it may sound like good fun to invent something like that, but it's not going to do anything. inventing something which has commercial application or commercial potential, that could lead to a sustainable product and one which will develop over time. They must be capable of lateral thinking. Thinking about products requires lateral thinking. It requires broader thinking, wider thinking. Thinking about the product, thinking about ways in which it can be used, ways of extending the usage of the product, ways in which the product could be developed and perhaps married up with other products to give even better experiences. We think about computing. Originally, computing was to process numbers, perhaps do mathematics. Then someone came up with the idea that it could be used as a word processor. And now we see computers in all sorts of ways. These, in a sense, are lateral thinking. We see it in education. Education was once somebody standing in a classroom talking to a group of students. And that's our classic view of education. But more and more, because of the pressures in the world, students can't travel long distances or pay high fees for tuition or whatever it is. They want a more convenient form of education. So we see computers filling that gap. So someone has come along with lateral thinking, thinking of ways in which products can be used differently. It's important in innovation to have imagination and vision. All innovation is the product of the mind. It means someone thinking about the product, imagining what the product could be under different circumstances or different conditions or with certain modifications. Someone is imagining it and then informing colleagues about the imagination to let their imaginations run with that as well. And this leads to discussions and debates, presentations, conflicts, arguments, disputes, agreements. But out of all of this, these human interactions, a better innovation should emerge, one which incorporates the best thinking. Because the best thinking should be the one that is recognized by all as the best. So, innovation is the product of imagination and vision. And that's how we get all of these. We get innovation, we get invention. Innovation is, if you like, minor inventions added on to the original one. These are the modifications. These are the additions. All of them are the product of imagination. The team who come up with ideas for innovations and inventions, the team who come up with these, they must be capable of withstanding criticism. Once an idea has been developed, the chances are it's going to be criticized. Sometimes the criticisms could even be personal. Why did you waste your time doing this? No one's going to want that. That's a waste of time. That's a waste of money and resources. This is a silly invention. Lots of adverse comments will be thrown around. The reason for that is difficult to explain. Sometimes it may be based on jealousy. Sometimes it may be based on ignorance, that the recipients don't understand what the product is. But sometimes the criticism can be useful. Sometimes people will criticize a product and in so doing improve the product, improve the concept. So, in fact, the developers of an idea the inventors or the innovators, they should seek criticism, not run away from it, not suppress it. By seeking criticism and taking all of the abuse, perhaps, but at the same time, amongst all of that, there may be good ideas. There may be ideas that are worth taking on board and trying to factor in. It's important that the developers of ideas have got good communication skills. They need to be able to communicate their vision of the product. And this is particularly important if the product hasn't got to prototype stage, if they're still working on pen and paper or on a computer screen. If they're still thinking about the product, just trying to get ideas about a product. They have an idea, but it's not fully developed, it's not there yet. If that's the case, they must be able to communicate the idea very clearly so that others may understand what they're trying to do. If it's prototyped, if they have a physical version of the product that they can show, it's easier. Communications is easier because the others are able to see what the product is. They're able to examine it. It's prototyped. But in the absence of getting that far, just trying to share an idea, trying to get comments and feedback, they will get a lot of criticism. A lot of it will be adverse and not nice, perhaps. But they will also get some useful criticism. But it's important for them to be able to communicate effectively, to make sure that there is clear understanding amongst those who are criticizing or looking at the project or giving feedback, clear understanding on their part of what the project is about. The team developing it, or the individual developing the product, must be realistic. They must be analytical, and they must be political. They must have good negotiation skills, in other words. Be political to have good negotiating skills. So they must be realistic about the product. They must be analytical. They must be able to analyze the situation. But they must not go into a fantasy world and imagine this product will take over the world. It may do, but it's very unlikely. So they must be realistic about what it's meant to do, what it's meant to achieve, and its commercial potential. They must be capable of team working. They must be able to share their ideas and give up areas to others and let others develop different parts of it. It depends on the complexity of the project or of the product that's been invented or the product that they are currently innovating. It depends on the complexity, but by and large, team working is a good idea and to be welcomed, because team working enables different opinions, different skills, different aptitudes to be brought to bear on the problem, and problem solving therefore becomes easier. There are different perspectives. So being able to work as a member of a team is an asset in developing innovations and inventions. The team must be forward-looking, despite the uncertainty and ignorance. A famous economist called Friedrich von Hayek once said that the future is unknowable. We can't know the future. It's unknowable, as he said. And something that's unknowable, something that we can't know, has a lot of uncertainty. We're not sure about what's going to happen in the world next week. We're certainly not sure what's going to happen in the world in a year or 2 years' time. What new products or what new inventions or what new issues are going to confront us. So the team working on an invention or an innovation must be forward-looking. They can't possibly secure against adverse developments in the world in the future because they don't know what those developments will be. Likewise, they don't know what their competitors are doing in the marketplace, for that matter. But despite all of that, they must be looking forward. They can't look backwards. Looking backwards has already been done, and everyone knows what the past has done. In other words, we know what products were out there, we know what the products could do. We want something new, so they must be forward-looking, developing new products. So even though they're looking into an area beset with uncertainty and ignorance simply means lack of knowledge of the future, which we all suffer from. We don't know what the future is going to be, so we are all ignorant of the future. But that doesn't stop us trying to project what we're doing into the future. So we must be forward-looking. And of course, the team must be determined to succeed. If they're trying to invent something or innovate something, they must be determined to succeed. They can't just give up because there's a problem. Unless that problem is deemed to be fundamental and the problem hasn't got a solution, but it's fundamental to the success of the project. And it could be the case that in that case that the product will have to be jettisoned. It'll have to be terminated. But the team must be determined to succeed. They must look at every angle and approach the project in a way that is in a very positive attitude. They must approach it in a way that they are going to solve the problem, they're going to innovate it, they're going to change it, they're going to improve it. And there must be an optimism about doing all of that. Now, issues that confront the innovation process. Well, there must be a rationale and a nature for the process. Why do the people want to innovate? Well, the quick answer to that is because there's a lot of competitive pressure. As I said in the previous slides, companies around the world are looking to the product and trying to innovate it and change it and improve it. So a company that does not engage in innovation is going to get left behind and will ultimately fail. There must be sufficient resources. It could be a startup, it could be someone who's invented something and now wants to commercialize it and going to innovate it to make it commercial. But they must have the startup resources to do so. Otherwise, it will remain a good idea. They're not going to get it started, unless they're very lucky. It could be in the nature of an innovation within an established business that the innovation itself must be funded internally. So there must be negotiations with management to secure the resources to do the innovation. And that's similar to having startup resources. So one way or the other, the project must be financed. Of course, there will be resistance to change. If a team are working on some sort of innovative project and they manage to bring up a better product, one that meets customers' needs and will be welcomed in the market. However, it will mean institutional change. The organisation will have to change, perhaps production will have to change, or the administration will have to change, or somebody will have to change to accommodate this new product. But people don't want to change. There will be resistance to change. People will threaten to leave or will cease to relate to the business, or there will be resistance to change. Humans tend to like the way things are done at the moment. They don't like to think of change. So some means must be proposed, some way must be proposed of overcoming the resistance to change. It's important to have market research and focus groups and determine customer requirements. It's important to aim the innovation at the market. It can't be just innovation for innovation's sake. That would be a waste of money, be a waste of resources. Innovation should be aimed at particular groups and the requirements of the groups. So in order to do that, it's necessary to have accurate market research and focus groups and meetings with customers and meetings with retailers and wholesalers and looking at what the competitors are doing and looking at what sales are. And if it's a service, it's the same thing. They must meet with their counterparts in the areas that purchase their service and talk to them about what they would like to see and how they would like to do it, to see the product delivered and how they would like to work with that. So it's continuously trying to get information back from the market, and that information should lead the innovative process. Of course, pricing and cost control is essential. It's pointless innovating a product that currently sells at a particular price, innovating it and then find that as a consequence of the innovation, the product has doubled or tripled in price, because that will alienate the customers. It's too much. It might be a better product and look nicer, but they're not prepared to pay for it. It depends on the nature of the product, of course. If it's a product that's used within manufacturing, for example, then style may not be a big issue, but functionality may be. But controlling costs is important. It's important in all parts of the business, but it's particularly important in looking at the innovative process, because there's no guarantee that the innovative process will lead to successful innovation. Teams may work on innovating a product and never successfully innovate the product. That's a possibility. So it's important that costs are controlled and that the impact of any change that's suggested does not severely increase the price or increase the price to such a level that it will damage sales and alienate customers. It's important to look also at distribution channels. The innovation process can lead to changes in the product, and changes in the product will lead to perhaps more sales in the marketplace, but it may influence the distribution channels. Perhaps once the product was delivered to warehouses who sold it on to retailers. But now if the product is seen as more upmarket as a consequence of the innovations, it may be sold directly online, or it may be sold through specialist outlets. In other words, it's important to look at the distribution channels, because these may change as the product changes. Quality is pervasive, and the need for quality is pervasive. Quality should be factored in at all levels. If quality is not factored in and there is innovation, then the product may be seen as inferior, or inferior to more traditional products. So a company may work on an established product, it has an established market and customers are happy with it, and then innovate the product, but the product is now unreliable or has issues or does not meet market requirements. the quality of the product may be deemed as not acceptable. The design may not be acceptable. The delivery, all sorts of aspects can be critical to the success of the product. But if the quality is suspect, reliability, warranties, and so on, if these are suspect, then the product will be damaged and the business will be damaged. There has to be organizational adjustment. If the product is innovated, then the company is ipso facto producing a different product. It depends on how much the innovation is. If it's quite a radical innovation, a fundamental change, it may mean retooling the business, new capital equipment, disposal of existing capital equipment, reorganizing the layout of the business. So there will be organizational change. There may also be in the offices organizational change, because markets may change, different marketing skills are required, different channels, distribution channels, as mentioned earlier, may be required, and so on. So it may be the case that there is quite fundamental organizational changes flowing from the innovative process. Even though the team are working on a project to innovate it and have worked for considerable time, put a lot of effort into it and a lot of resources, if it is still not deemed as commercially viable, it should be terminated. Cut costs, cut losses, and terminate the endeavour. It may be the case simply that the product could not be innovated. But an honesty is required on the part of the personnel working on the innovation process to say that they have gone as far as they can, they've looked at all conceivable ideas, they're out of ideas, they haven't managed to innovate the product. It's a hopeless cause. In that case, terminate. That's the reference, one of the references used in the preparation of this class, and that's what we're going to deal with here. It's an important class because it looks at the downsides associated with innovation as well as the more optimistic sides. But let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.